Hey guys, so I wanted to come on here and talk about this. Video. I saw this video on Tariq's the little radio show thing that he does, not the Ustream show, but the one he does on Wednesdays, or sometimes he does it on Thursdays. And I saw this video, and it was very interesting to me because it says a lot of things that I've already said in my videos, but it's better to not just say stuff, but to show you guys what I'm talking about. A lot of people know that I'm not a big fan of integration. I think it was a mistake. I've told you guys that whenever any law gets passed in this country, it's only passed to the advantage of the dominant society. They do not allow any law to be passed that does not benefit them exponentially, and our people nearly none at all. So I've always said if integration was allowed, then that must be to the benefit of the dominant society. That's just the reality of what it was. I've also said there was no need to integrate because integration hadn't in the past, and it still hasn't benefited the Black community. The only perceived benefit, and I use perceived because whatever's going on in your head doesn't necessarily mean it's reality. The only perceived benefit that Black people have gotten from integration was this voluntary sexual access to some people that they shouldn't want to be sexually with anyway. So all of this was a byproduct of Black low self-esteem. Now, many Black people will say, oh, we had dirty water faucets. Oh, we were just living in squalor. I'm pretty sure some people were, as there's a number of different Black people who are far more poor and disenfranchised monetarily than other people. But I've always maintained that all Black people weren't living like that. In fact, I told people that in actuality, Black people's communities were the most successful communities in the country. Now, this isn't anything that they'll tell you in history because they want you to only believe that you come from poverty, and you can't accomplish anything, despite the fact that your ancestors built this country. They don't want you to understand what you can accomplish when you're on your own. Of course, they're also not going to put this out because it goes directly against the self-esteem that they have. Understand that your position in society, their position in society, their self-esteem is 100% dependent on what you are doing, whether you're succeeding or failing. This is why you can't keep them away from any Black channel. They're always going to be there. They're always going to be stalking you. So I don't know that I'm going to go over this whole entire thing. There were some things that Tariq didn't point out that I wish he would have pointed out in his video. Although the video was great, the breakdown of it is great. You know, most of the time nobody can really cover every single thing, especially if you're trying to keep a time limit. But there were a number of different things relating to the psychology of Black people that I want to point out, because I've always said they don't have any intellectual advantage over you. They don't really have any advantage over you except their knowledge of psychology and being extremely savage and manipulative. A lot of Black people get confused. They seem to think that this manipulation is genuine life for them. And that's based on in Black people's head needing that acceptance. Now, this was in 1954, so I want you to understand how they could be talking about 2017. So let's get into this, and then I'm going to pause a couple times throughout it to give you some commentary, but here we go.
Hello, I'm Bob Trout. I've got a story here that I think is big, really big, because it's bound to have a terrific impact on business. I'm talking about a new market, a big new market, millions upon millions of new prospects with $15 billion to spend. That's right, I said.
Now, I want to pause right here because this was in 1954. Okay, this was in 1954. So this was during Jim Crow segregation. He's talking about the Black community amassed wealth to the degree of $15 billion in 1954. So there wasn't a whole bunch of poverty. There wasn't poverty to the level that they want you to believe that it was. Black people had a buying power of $15 billion in 1954. Understand that that was a whole lot more. The value of $15 billion in 1954 was exponentially more than it is right now in 2017. So that's a lot of wealth that the Black community had.
15 billion. That's a lot of money, isn't it? The surprising thing is that it's a fresh market, still full of opportunities. It grew up so fast, not so big in a hurry, that few of us realize its scope. Now, these days, nobody's likely to pass up chances to sell. And yet right here in our own front yard, there's a neglected market. There's money waiting to be spent. To get the story of this market, to be able to tell you the secret of selling the Negro, we did a lot of digging. We talked to leading businessmen, the customers, and the salesmen. We went to Washington, D.C. We set up cameras and other key points around the nation. And out of this all, there emerged a story, the story of a new market.
Now, one thing I told you guys is that they're obsessed with our community, because he's just telling you, okay, we went into their communities, we set up cameras, we did all this stuff because we have such a deep obsession with them. We need to understand what they're doing at all times, because again, what they're telling you is our position in society, whether we feel like we're successful or not, is dependent on them. Understand that we don't sit back and think about that. You should do it, obviously, because this is called strategy. This is how they're maintaining an advantage over you. So we should be thinking about that, but we don't.
Yes, this is the market we're talking about, the new Negro family. Their name is Wells or Wilson, Smith or Brown or Alexander or Breed. They live in Chicago, in Atlanta, or New York, in Detroit, St. Louis, Los Angeles, any one of the 1,000 cities and towns, all over the country.
Now, he said all over the country, okay? He said any one of the 1,000 cities or towns all over the country. So they can sit there and push to you, oh, Black people during segregation, we were extremely poor and we had dirty water fountains and we just had shacks to live in. They can push that if they want to. That wasn't the case. They're talking about Black wealth, a well of wealth in the Black community that they want to tap into. And so what they said is, there's a whole bunch of wealth in this community. We need to figure out how to tap into it by getting into their psyche. And they said to themselves, since we created their psyche, then we already know what to expect. Let's continue.
Families such as this are enjoying new prosperity. They have new interests, new standards of living, a buying power they've never enjoyed before. They're good prospects for practically all types of goods and services. All too often, though, they're overlooked prospects. Why? Because of some good, valid reason? No. They're overlooked because of mistaken ideas, because of out-of-date ideas about how the Negro lives, how he buys. The truth of the matter is that the Negro lives pretty much the same as other folks. He buys pretty much the same way, too. But just the same, a lot of old doubts and opinions keep cropping up over and over again.
I don't like to do business with Negroes. They're drifters. You can't keep track of them.
Yes, although a lot of people think that way, the truth is that 1 out of every 3 Negro families living in cities today owns its own home. That figure comes directly from the United States.
I want to stop right there, because they were talking about, oh, there's so much poverty in segregation, we just need to integrate. He just told you 1 in 3 Black people during that time owned their own home. That is a lot. That's a lot. 1 in 3 Black people own their own home. Again, this is in 1954. This is during Jim Crow. This is before the civil rights movement to integrate. So there really wasn't any huge monetary need to integrate. You had amassed a wealth of $15 billion in 1954. This is what you had. But I'm going to tell you why Black people integrated, because the one thing they didn't have was that approval from their oppressor. And that in the psyche of Black people meant more than any amount of wealth that they had. And that's still true today in 2017. That's why you can have them out there rallying to get respect, not ownership from the NFL. Because you still have that slave mentality by and large. Let's continue.
States Bureau of Census.
Maybe so, but Negroes are poor credit risk.
Not more of a credit risk than any other group. Actually, the Negro home buyer meets his payments faithfully, often more faithfully than other race groups in the same economic level.
Now, look at what they'll tell you, because this right here is telling you where all of these shoddy stereotypes come from. You have all these stereotypes. Oh, Black people don't pay their bills. They can't keep up anything. They got bad credit. He just told you back then. This is what to tell you how well you actually were during segregation. They make their payments more faithfully than any other racial group. All of them who have the same income level. But you let them paint your narrative for you. Because despite all of this success that you had, you didn't feel successful because you didn't have that approval. You didn't have that acceptance. You needed your oppressor to look at you and smile down upon you. That's where the mistake is still being made.
That's the information we got from people who want to know. The National Association of Real Estate Boards.
Well, maybe, but I've always heard that Negroes buy shoddy, poor quality merchandise.
No, it's just the other way around. According to leading researchers, in proportion to population and income, Negroes buy more quality products than any other comparable United States group. You see, there are a lot of confused notions about the Negro customer, but when you dig right down and find out about them, they just don't hold water. Negroes own homes. They meet their payments faithfully. They buy good brands of merchandise. So why let a lot of old-fashioned ideas hurt profits? Take a look at the real facts. Here in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, some amazing facts and figures about this new market have been uncovered. For a first-hand report, we would like to take you directly to the United States Department of Commerce to hear this story from the Secretary of Commerce himself. Here is the Honorable Sinclair Weeks, the Secretary of Commerce of the United States.
In the Department of Commerce, we are constantly alert to trends that mean a healthier national economy, better business for the nation as a whole. Recently, we have been interested in a rising young market, one that represents a huge potential for goods and services. I'm referring to the new Negro market. The tremendous buying power of this group is backed, of course, by an increased earning power. The average Negro family's income is at a record high. In fact, since 1939, it has increased more than the average income of all other Americans. Let's take a look.
Now, what he said is that since 1939, Black people's income increased higher than anybody else in the country. That's what he just said, your income increased. So you had more wealth in the Black community than anybody else in the country from 1939 up until 1954. That's nearly 20 years. For a 20-year period, you accumulated more wealth than anyone in the country. And yet you fought to integrate. You fought to integrate, complaining about dirty sinks and messed up books, which we already know. Look at what they do now. They'll highlight certain impoverished areas like Chicago, for example, and they'll say, oh, this is the Black community. They'll put that on the news and they'll say that's the Black community, and then you'll believe it. Meanwhile, what this dude is saying is back then, Black people had more wealth than anybody. Now, why would they allow you to integrate knowing that you had more money than them? Because you were doing better than them even during Jim Crow. So they already see in oppression, if we leave these people alone, they're going to do better than us because they are doing better than us. So what they said is, let's see how to get their money. So you think in 1954 they made this video, they made this documentary on how to get your money out of your community, and then it was no wonder that they let that civil rights bill be passed and integration go, because they're like, oh, okay, we'll get more of their money. All of their money will go into our community, and that's exactly what happened. All of your money went into their community. Now you have a national wealth of zero. Although you have trillions of dollars in buying power, you don't have any economic wealth in your community. The value monetarily of your community is nearly at zero, despite having trillions of dollars in buying power. This is how much they know you.
Look at a few figures. An official Department of Commerce report shows that at least 1/3 of the Negroes living in cities earn from $2,000 to $5,000 a year. Today, the average Negro wage earner brings home a paycheck 4 times larger than the one he collected in 1939. As a whole, the Negro market has a total income of about $15 billion every year. And after taxes, Negro families still have many billions of dollars to spend. Here is a buying power that cannot help but have a tremendous effect on our national economy and on business prosperity in general. When these dollars are spent for a wide range of goods, services, and employment, business everywhere is bound to feel the impact.
This new buying power has resulted in a class Negro market, a profitable, above-average income group of consumers. For example, the nation's...
Now, they said that you had an above-average income group. You heard that part where they said you had made more money. You were earning more money than any racial group in this country. And yet Black people sat up there and complained about dirty water faucets. And then they sat up there and they complained about bad books. You had a whole bunch of wealth in your community. Could have made your own books. You were doctors. You had a bunch of communities. You had productions. You had a number of different things because you were segregated. You didn't have a choice but to. So your community was thriving far more than theirs was. But yet you pushed to give that all away just to be around them. That's why I say it was about low self-esteem. Mind you, I didn't need to see this to know that it was about low self-esteem, because Black people are doing the same thing today that they were doing before. Still vying for that approval, still vying for that acceptance. It's really ridiculous, to be honest.
Largest newspaper and magazine research organization, Daniel Starch and staff, reports these significant figures. More than 51% of the readers of Ebony magazine have a record player in their homes. Almost 64% own a television set. And almost 78% enjoy the convenience of an electric refrigerator. It is also a fact, and this is from the magazine The Food Field Reporter, that Negroes spend almost $3 billion a year for food alone. Per capita, they buy more cosmetics, drugs, and toiletries than anyone else in the country. And their children are better educated, too, because since 1930, enrollment in Negro colleges is up 2,500%.
Now, you are better educated than anybody else in the country. So you have the money, you have the education, you have the material things. We already know musically you were more talented. We already know athletically you are more talented. And yet in the psyche of Black people, despite having everything that they would need to have their own community and be happy, they didn't have that one thing called acceptance that you're never going to get. That wasn't enough. None of this was enough for us, although they know our stats because their studying is, they know our stats in and out. They could probably tell you your blood type right now because they study you so much, always paying attention to what you're doing. So they can say inferiority, they can say whatever they want to. Look, let them live in as much of a delusion as they want to. Allow them to live in as much of a delusion as they want to. Bottom line is they already know what you can do because you've been doing it. But what they said is that, oh, we need to break all that up. Absolutely not. They're not going to sit over there with that much success. Certainly not more success than us, because we're supposed to be superior. We're supposed to be naturally smarter. Why is it that these inferior people over here are doing way better than us? They said that you're doing better than them. They said you were doing better than anybody in the country, but you fought to integrate under the guise of extreme poverty. There's poverty in everybody's community. But you didn't see them getting up. You didn't see anybody in the dominant society rising up and saying, no, I want to integrate with black people. They have more wealth than us. Let's integrate. Even though you had more wealth and intelligence and material things than them, you still hated integration under the guise of everybody is just somehow poor and broke. And that wasn't even the case. The civil rights movement didn't start in 1954. So before you started the civil rights movement, you had more wealth than anybody in the country. And yet we sat up here and go ask any black person why they needed to integrate, and they're going to tell you a story about poverty. How does the one group in this country who has the most wealth at that time need to integrate with people who have less than them? These were coming from the American Census stats that said you had more. They said you were earning more than any other racial group in the country. But you wanted to integrate under the guise of poverty. And I get that the whole poverty is one of the reasons why you wanted to integrate. But the core of the reason, really, that had everything to do with low self-esteem. Let's continue.
But really, to recognize the importance of this class Negro market, we must realize that something has been happening economically in our country. People are on the move. The population is shifting. The makeup of metropolitan populations today is different than it was just a few short years ago. To give you a better idea of what we mean, we set up several cameras, candid cameras, in a number of shopping locations. Take a look at these shoppers. Negro customers buy. Why do they buy? How do you sell to them? Let's find out. Let's hear the opinion of men who have spent a lifetime studying the buying habits of customers the world over. Here is what sales psychologists have to say about selling to the Negro.
The secret of selling to the Negro is expressed in one word. That word is recognition. Now, there's nothing on.
Now, he said in one word, which is recognition. Now, that translates for acceptance. I want to be seen. I want somebody to acknowledge that I have something and congratulate me. And guess what that is? That is a byproduct of low self-esteem. It is a compensatory action, an overcompensatory action, meaning you need to get all this stuff because you need to overcompensate for something. That's why you're the only one doing it. Let's continue.
Unusual about that. People want to be recognized. They need recognition. That's basic in all of us. But perhaps because he's had so little of it, the Negro needs even more. He needs to feel important and appreciated. This need is a very real and important. It shows up even in many of the Negro's shopping habits. Anyone who sells or wants to sell to the Negro customer should know about some of these habits. 3 habits in particular play a big part in every sales transaction. To begin with, most Negroes buy by brand. They ask for products by name. They're quick to turn down off brands. Do you wonder why? Well, listen to what this customer is thinking.
That last hat I bought just didn't hold up at all.
You see, for a long time, the Negro has been sold a lot of shoddy, second-class merchandise. So now he asks for name brands in order to make sure he gets his money's worth.
Now, I want to stop there because getting a name brand doesn't mean that you're going to get your money's worth. Most of the time, you are paying specifically for the name. They're getting it made and shining just like every other manufacturer is, especially now where they want to cut corners and cut costs. But one thing you need to pay attention to is that and this is a psychologist, and this is why I tell you guys, study psychology, understand the psychology of what you're dealing with. He said the Negro needs more recognition than anyone because he's been disenfranchised so much. That translates to the Negro has low self-esteem. He's been disenfranchised by the dominant society. Now he wants acceptance. So now he thinks if he buys all these products and get all these things to the degree that's superseding that of other groups, then somehow he's going to be recognized of that. So basically the psychologist is saying you have low self-esteem and your low self-esteem is manifested in your buying habits. That's still the case today. Getting Jordans, getting Michael Kors, running around talking about Chanel bags, supporting people that don't like you, getting Cadillac Escalades. It's always have to be something big. Going in there and getting those Rolex watches in the middle of somebody calling the police on you because they're racist and you're still buying it. That means you're equating all of these material things to somehow people looking at you differently, but you still live in a system of white supremacy. So clearly none of that is doing it, but you'll keep striving for the unattainable, which is the acceptance and the recognition of something you don't need. Why do you need the recognition of a demon? This is your psyche on display. And this was in 1954, before most of you were even born who watched this, but you still have the same psyche.
Buying by brand. That's the first important Negro buying habit. Now, the second. The Negro buys good quality merchandise. Symbols of quality and prestige are very important to the Negro customer. This woman, for example, is buying fine crystalware. But she is also buying the admiration and approval of her friends and relatives. Listen to her thoughts.
Now, he might as well have said that today. He said he could have said this Negro is buying a pair of Jordans, but he's also buying the approval of everybody in the hood. He could have just said that. He could have said this girl over here, she's buying a Michael Kors or a Chanel bag, but what she's really buying is the ability to stun on everybody in the hood and show that she gave her money to a racist person that doesn't even like her. Because that's what we're out in these streets doing. You have all this money, but you're giving it to this community because you're still thriving for the same thing that your ancestors wanted, which is approval that you're never going to get. Still don't got it. You can find the richest black person on the face of this earth, and they still will face racism, i.e. Oprah going into that other country and facing racism, despite the fact that she was trying to buy a $40,000 purse. Doesn't matter, still facing racism. You still haven't got that yet. Had successful communities, had more wealth than anybody in this country, had more finer material things than anybody in this country, but you decided to fight and be murdered and die to be around these people that you need not be around. And you still haven't gotten any benefit from being around them. The benefit that you think you got is in your head, and it's not. Even the limited sexual access that you think you get is leading to your demise and further disenfranchisement, but you keep striving for it because we refuse to check our psychology.
Isn't it beautiful? I can hardly wait to show it to Sally and Joan.
It's a well-known fact that many Negro customers are influenced by the opinions of others. What their friends may think of a certain item often decides whether or not the sale is made. So remember, the Negro buys quality merchandise. That's the second important point. And here's the third thing to remember when selling to a Negro customer. When he specifically asks for one thing, don't try to sell him something else. Don't try to switch him at the point of sale. If you do, he'll probably react something like this.
Doesn't he think I've got the money to pay for it?
There's a reason for this reaction.
Listen, this is still something that black people do. Still something that you do. Oh, he think I'm cheap. They think I can't afford this. Let me buy the whole bar. Let me buy 10 of these watches as opposed to one, because I'm going to show them. Since they think I don't have a little money to give them, let me give them a lot. That's called low self-esteem. and they're taking advantage of your low self-esteem. They were taking advantage of it back then, and they're still taking advantage of it because you still want that false sense of acceptance. This isn't about anything, but he might as well have said, look, the Black community is full of low self-esteem and self-hate. Let's capitalize to it. Your self-hate is a monetary note to them. This is why they keep reinforcing it, because it is liquid self-hate gold to them. Filling their communities, making them very wealthy, and you keep doing it. Literally, self-hate for you is the gift that keeps on giving to them because they keep capitalizing off of it. Nobody wants to get it, though. Nobody wants to start supporting each other. Nobody wants to withdraw all of their finances to the degree that you can, obviously, from their community. You want to keep giving it to it because you think you can buy your way out of racism, and that ain't happening.
Again, because he's had experience with cheap merchandise, the Negro resents being offered a substitute. He wants to be sold on quality, not price. The Negro buys by brand, he buys quality, and he doesn't like to be switched at point of sale. These are the keys to selling the Negro customer. Another point, the Negro family does things together, as a group. The family works as a unit. It lives as a unit. And it buys as a unit. When you sell to one member, you many times sell to all. It's also true that many places of entertainment are still closed to the Negro. So he spends more of his money for the things that are available to him, often for items that are considered luxuries. Another trait of the Negro market.
Again, and buying these luxury items, this is a way. It's the same as if you get stressed out and you go eat a whole bunch of fatty food that they call comfort food. It's all the same thing. You having a low self-esteem and you're satisfying yourself and giving yourself something for temporary happiness. Still doing it. This was back in 1954. You're still doing it today. And I want to point out, too, notice how you had a bunch of obviously biracial people in this video because they got to support the colorism at the end of the day. You have a bunch of biracial people still nonetheless living in Jim Crow, still nonetheless being referred to as a Negro, but we got a lot of delusional Black people that just want to run around being delusional, thinking somehow because a Black person has a white parent, then that's sheltering them from the same thing that you're getting. It's just ridiculous. That's a product of your low self-esteem too, because you feel like because you're being disenfranchised, now you need to disenfranchise this group of people that you think is less than you based on their genetics, because you're taking on the mentality of your oppressor. You've already taken it on. You just haven't got the benefits of having the mentality of your oppressor, and you're not going to.
Is the fact that it is a pre-sold market. We know that the Negro buys by brand, and he buys the brands that he knows something about.
Now, a pre-sold market, that means we already know that you're going to run out and buy these things. We already know that. That's what they're saying. We already know your pathology so much. We know that we can keep murdering you. We can murder your children. We can do all this. And we already know this market is still pre-sold. It's recession-proof. It's basically sex at the end of the day. Because nobody has to sell sex to anybody. Sex will sell itself because people are going to have sex. That's a biological function. Basically, what they're saying is that your spending habits as a result of your low self-esteem is becoming a biological function for you to the degree that they can predict it. They already know you're going to buy it regardless. They already know that whatever happens in society, your biological functions are going to remain the same. And regardless to what happens in society, Black people's buying habits are still going to stay the same. You're still going to buy Jordans. You're still going to buy Michael Kors. You're still going to try to go out here and make all these different people rich. Pre-sold market. Because of your low self-esteem. Nothing more, nothing less.
Where does the Negro buyer get this information? We know that Negro customers are turning more and more to the publications that are tailored specifically to their needs, that give them the news and the information that they want to read about. Many leading businessmen and companies already know this. That's why so many of them are taking this direct, sure route of reaching the Negro customer.
And that's why they went and bought Ebony and Essence magazine, because they want to control that too.
The vice president of advertising of the Good Watch Company, for example, says this. In many important cities throughout the United States, Negroes are important customers in the credit union. Therefore, it seemed that Ebony magazine would be a very important advertising medium for us. We would say it was very well received, and from our viewpoint, a very successful campaign. From the Remington Rand Company comes this statement. Our records show that advertising in Ebony has been effective in many ways. As all good advertising should, it has built a terrific amount of goodwill and has brought a volume of sales and sales inquiries. A representative of the Alaga Syrup Company makes this statement. Because of Alaga's regard for the influence of Ebony in the Negro market, advertising space was doubled. Alaga's long experience in selling to Negroes now takes the most direct route to its best customers, reaching Ebony's 2.5 million audience in every issue. And here are the statements of still other business leaders.
Yes, many business leaders are discovering the most direct and most efficient way of reaching the new Negro market. Look here at the results of the same advertisement in two different publications, Ebony and another general magazine. You can see that proportion.
The order? Well, to tell you the truth, I don't do anything.
Anything different, that is. I've been calling on these accounts long enough to know that the Negro just wants to be treated like everybody else. No matter who you're calling on, a little friendliness and courtesy help a lot. And naturally, anybody resents being patronized or talked down to. So I usually call a man Mr. Brown, Mr. Smith, or Mr. whatever his name is, until he tells me to call him by his first name. And of course, I always stick to business. I stay away from talk about race or religion or politics. That goes for talk about Negro celebrities, too. You know, this business about what good prize fighters and singers the Negroes are. Who cares? When a guy's in business, no matter what color his skin is, he's interested in making a living, in making money. That's uppermost in his mind. I guess maybe what I'm saying is that I try to help any way I can, sometimes with displays or ad materials, or an idea once in a while. The important thing is that if it helps push sales for the dealer, it helps push them for me, too.
Now, I'm going to leave it right there. And the reason why I'm going to leave it right there is because throughout this video, I actually skipped along some parts, just so you guys know. Because I wanted to get to some important parts, as this video is already going on 40 minutes, and I want to lessen it. But what this salesperson said not only reflects the attitude that they still have today, it also reflects your interracial relationships. Because he said, I'm going to keep it strictly business. I'm going to pretend to be nice because I have to, because I have to be nice to get what I want. Duh, obviously everybody have to do that. You're not going to go and mistreat somebody and get niceties, except now in 2017 you can still do that to Black people. But he said, I'm going to avoid all topics of race and religion. I don't care about how good they are musically. I'm not talking about that either. I want some money. This is translating into your relationships with them. Because a lot of you sit up in relationships with them. They don't want to talk about race or religion. They don't care nothing about that. They're there with you for a sexual upgrade and so that they can appear non-racist. So they don't care nothing about anything. They keep it strictly business. They're being nice to you simply because they have to. If they want a sexual upgrade, the women want a bigger dick, the men want a black vagina, of course I'm going to be nice to you because that's what I got to do to get sex. But the minute that I get it, I'm going to switch into my natural racist self, and you're still going to tolerate me because at the end of the day, you want my acceptance. And you want that false sense of validation. This is how much they know you. You're allowing this to happen This is really just what it is. This is what it is for the Black community. Your psychology in a nutshell, and yet we refuse to understand their psychology and act accordingly. This is where they're getting the leg up on you, knowing how you think, because how you think ultimately leads to your behavior. That's why in the miseducation of the Negro, they said, if you can control his mind, you can control the behavior. And that is what they're doing, and they're doing that for multiple fronts. Your low self-esteem being one, religion being another, your desire for their acceptance being another. So this is who you are. So people can miss me with this, we had to integrate because we were poor. No, you didn't. You have more wealth in your community than anybody in the country. They just told you that. That's just the bottom line. Not only did you build the country, but then even when you were in a bad situation, you still amassed more wealth than they did. And they said, let's get the money out of their community and let's keep it out of their community. And they're succeeding because your low self-esteem keeps allowing them to do it. Like, comment, subscribe, share the video. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you in the next one.